What do you truly own? Buddhism's answer to death. There are several passages in the Pali Canon where King Pasenadi has been reflecting about the Dhamma, and then he comes and he tells the Buddha about his amazing discoveries. They're all pretty basic. He's someone who never thought about the Dhamma before, and one of his discoveries one day is that people who behave unskillfully are leaving themselves unprotected. Even if they have a huge army, they're still unprotected. Whereas people who behave skillfully, even if they have no army at all, are very well protected. It's good to think that, good to keep that point in mind. We look around us and civilization seems pretty uncertain. The economy, the society, the values of the society, everything seems to be falling down, falling apart. And how do you keep yourself protected in a case like that? Through your virtue and generosity and your goodwill. The qualities that the Buddha calls treasures. Your sense of conviction in the principle of Kamma. Your virtue, your compunction, your sense of shame, your knowledge of the Dhamma, your generosity, your discernment. These things are your protection. So we work on developing these things. Sometimes we're afraid that the things we've tried to build up as we go through life will get torn down. And you have to face the fact that, yes, they will. Maybe they get torn down more quickly than you might have thought, but they're all going to get torn down one way or another. We'd like to leave our marks on the world, but who knows what will be left? Your goodness is your protection. Years back, I was visiting my father in Virginia. He was living in Williamsburg at the time, but when I was a teenager, we lived in Charlottesville. And as a family, we'd built a house. We'd hired some builders, but the family worked together on the house as well. Designing it, painting it, Dad did the cabinets in the kitchen. And one day, he decided he wanted to go see the old house. So we drove up and discovered that the current owners were not taking care of it at all. It was beginning to fall apart. On the way back, he mentioned to me that as he looked back on his life, he couldn't see that there was anything he had left. It had all been destroyed one way or another, starting with the farm and then his job with the government. Of course, I like to think that at least I was there, something he'd created that was good. But it got me to thinking, if you try to measure the worth of your life in terms of things you can accomplish outside, it's all going to seem pretty hopeless. The more you try to build up protection against the changes that are going to happen, if you build it up in things that have nothing to do with the goodness of the heart, the more is going to get torn down. And sometimes the things that you build up as your security are going to get turned against you. So you have to remember, as you're thinking about what kind of life you want to live, that's going to have some meaning, and it will continue to have meaning even if things change very quickly and drastically. You have to look at the qualities of the mind. These are the things that are really solid and are not destroyed by events outside unless you let the events outside destroy them. In other words, you decide that life becomes so hard that you're going to abandon the Dhamma to survive. But otherwise, those inner qualities are there. As the Thais like to say, fire doesn't burn them, water doesn't wash them away, the wind doesn't blow them away, nobody can steal them, or in the phrase of the canon, kings and thieves can't take them. It's interesting that they put kings and thieves in the same sentence. These are the treasures we're working on right here. It's because of our conviction in the principle of Kamma that our lives are shaped by our actions, and our actions are shaped by our intentions, and our intentions are shaped by the mind, that we realize we've got to train the mind. That's the principle of conviction. And it carries through our outside activities as well, in terms of virtue, shame, and compunction, all of which center on the realization that we don't want to harm anybody. Now, not harming doesn't mean not hurting their feelings. This is an important distinction to make. If you let other people's feelings run your life, you're going to start doing some things that really have nothing to do with the Dhamma at all. Harming other people means basically getting them to see things in such a way that they start breaking the precepts. So you don't break the precepts yourself. You don't get others to break the precepts. You would be ashamed to engage in behavior like that, and you realize the consequences. And you're alive to the consequences. That's what compunction means. It's the opposite of apathy. And as you begin to develop a sense of well-being inside here, it's a lot easier to be more generous with others. Then, of course, there's discernment, realizing what's really important in life and what's not, that the goodness of your mind is what will see you through. So we're working on many of these treasures right now. You read about times when civilization has collapsed, and the people who survived the best were the ones who were spontaneous in helping one another. This is where the qualities of generosity and goodwill come in. Because if you amass a lot of wealth for yourself, do you think the people around you are going to rest content and say, well, that's his wealth, and because it's his, we'll leave it alone? You're going to have to share if you're going to survive. So it's good to develop the attitude that survival is best when it's done skillfully. And it's worthwhile when it allows you to maintain skillfulness of your mind. Then, of course, there's the principle that whatever good you do is going to go with you wherever you go. So you benefit now, you benefit on into the future by working on your genuine protection, which is also your genuine inner wealth. So think about that. Generosity, goodwill. The two principles go together, but they're different. Goodwill is something you can make universal. In fact, you have to make it universal if you want to get the most benefit out of it. But this doesn't mean you're going to go around protecting everybody. That's a huge misunderstanding that comes from the passage in the Karanya Metta Sutta about developing an unlimited mind of unlimited goodwill for the world, in the same way a mother would protect her only child. This doesn't mean that you try to protect the entire world as a mother would protect her child. There's no way you can do that. It's humanly impossible. What the Buddha's saying is, you protect your goodwill as a mother would protect her child. In other words, no matter how badly people behave, you need to have goodwill for them. As the Buddha said, even if bandits were sawing off your limbs with a two-handled saw, they had you pinned down, there would be nothing you could do to stop them. You'd still have to have goodwill for them. That's something you would have to protect, even as you realize you couldn't protect your life at that point. So goodwill can be unlimited. Generosity, however, has its limits. Each of us has only so many resources, so much time, so much energy. And you have to be careful if you want to make the most of your generosity, where you're going to give and where you won't. There are a lot of people for whom you have goodwill, but you realize that you can't help them because it's beyond your capacity. These can include not only people who are far away, but often people in your own family. It's not an act of kindness just to give in to people's demands. You have to decide, are the demands reasonable? Are they in line with the Dhamma? As the Buddha said, generosity is best when it doesn't harm you or harm the other person. So there are limits on generosity. Now, the Buddha did say to give wherever you feel inspired, where you feel the gift would be well used. In other words, he's not imposing any restrictions on your generosity. But then the question comes up, where is a gift is given so that it bears the best fruit? And the Buddha said, that's a different question. That's where you have to be very careful about who you give to, what you give. Looking at your intention, looking at the gift itself, looking at the recipient, looking at the time and place, exercising your discernment around these issues so that generosity becomes a skill and really does become a protection. So we work on these qualities not just because they're sentimental and nice, but because they really do make a difference between where it's worth surviving and not. The Ajahns going into the forest in Thailand had to take along a lot of goodwill for all the animals, all the thieves and other people living in the forest. It's not as if you go out into the forest and meet only the best people all the time. You have to learn how to be accommodating with all kinds. And your goodwill and your generosity will help you survive no matter where you go. If you go into a new society where you don't know anybody, goodwill and generosity are the things that will carry you through. When things begin to break down, goodwill and generosity will carry you through. So remember, your protection lies in your goodness, in the skillfulness of your intentions, and the discernment with which you carry those intentions out. Those are the things that will see you through no matter what happens. That's why the Buddha taught them as the Dhamma, because they've been true all the time, as civilizations rise and fall and then rise again. These are the qualities that make human life worth living, make it the kind of life that we can get the most out of it, regardless of how things arise and fall outside. Noble treasures. The mind has a very deep habit, a little question inside that keeps getting asked over and over again. What are we doing next? What are we doing next? If you come up with a lot of different answers, the mind gets scattered and feels fearful. So, for the next hour, try to convince yourself that there's only one thing you really have to do, which is to stay with the breath. Then work with the breath. Explore the breath energies in your body. Notice where you can feel the in-breath, where you feel the out-breath, and what you can do to breathe in a way that's more comfortable. In doing that, try not to put too much pressure on the breath to change it. Often, the best way to change it is to simply think of the breath doing different things from what it's normally doing. You'll see that the power of the mind, the power of that perception, can actually change the way you breathe. So, think of the body as a big sponge, something wide open with pores on all sides, so that the breath energy can come in and out from any direction. As you hold that perception in mind, see how the body responds. Then, as the question comes up again, what next? What next is the same thing again and again and again. If you stick with it long enough, you'll find that you can get deeper and deeper into concentration. It requires some intelligence. You can't just say, well, just stay with the breath and force it down. You have to use your ingenuity. You have to use your powers of observation to notice what kind of breathing you like, what kinds of changes in the breath you'll find interesting, and how you can explore the body and different parts of the body so that you can get to know the parts of the body that you may have been ignoring and see how you can nourish them. See how they reward you as they get nourished. All this comes under that one heading, what next? Stay with the breath. Of course, the mind has other agendas as well. It'll tell itself, this is just a diversion, or this is not all that important. I've got other things I've got to think about now. Here again, you have to use your discernment, especially with the part of the mind that tends to worry about the future. You've got to remind yourself that the best way to prepare for the future is to develop your mind. After all, what is the worst thing that could happen in the future? Most of us will say, well, you die, and that the worst death would be one that was long, drawn out, and painful. But the Buddha says, there are things that are worse than death. You do unskillful things. Hold to wrong views. That can lead to pain and suffering beyond death, and it can last for many lifetimes. What are your best protections against doing unskillful things? There's a list of qualities that the Buddha calls the 7 noble treasures. Qualities of mind that you develop, that you can really depend on in the future, that will protect you from doing the things that would cause harm to yourself and harm to others, and that will encourage you to do things that will have long-term benefits. You develop these qualities in the same way that traders on Wall Street have their, what they call their nut, like a squirrel, because they know the system is very fragile. It could collapse at any time. They figure there must be some way to put their money into something that doesn't depend on the fragility of the system. Of course, money is never really safe, though. There's a great passage in the canon talking about how you might bury a treasure way underground, but it could get destroyed by water. It could get destroyed by underground animals. Someone else might dig it up. One of my favorite lines is that Nagas might take it away. So even your nut, if that's the kind of nut it is not going to be all that safe. But the qualities of your mind are safe. Nobody else even has to know about them. And they're really yours. They really do protect you against the big danger in life, i.e., wrong views and wrong actions. 4 of the elements in this list relate directly to action. First, there's conviction. Traditionally, this means conviction in the Buddha's awakening, and that translates into the principle that he gained awakening through his own efforts. He really did find the deathless happiness, and the qualities he had to develop in the course of perfecting his skills and using his own efforts were qualities that we all have in potential form. He took those potentials and developed them. That means that we can develop our potentials too. That's one of the implications of his awakening. The other implication, of course, relates to his insight into karma in the course of the awakening. That there really is a continuity from one life to the next, and it's through your actions. You can't say, well, I was born in America this lifetime, and I want to be born in America the next lifetime. That's not for sure. You can't necessarily keep the same gender. You can't necessarily keep the same background. You certainly can't keep your possessions. When you die, it's like a trap door opening beneath you. All the things you depended on, around which you build your identity here, they go. What's going to receive you under the trap door? The actions you've done. This leads directly to the next 3 qualities: virtue, shame, and compunction. Virtue, of course, is a matter of the precepts. You make up your mind you're not going to harm anybody under any circumstances, with the emphasis on the any. You could think about what could happen, say, if civilization collapses. You read stories about people in war and some of the horrible things they suddenly find themselves doing because they feel the push of poverty, the push of hunger, make them do things that they would never do under ordinary circumstances. You have to ask yourself, are you immune to those kinds of pressures? That's one of the reasons why the precepts are kept simple. No killing, no stealing. They don't have a lot of exemptions. They don't have a lot of explanations, just quick, easy to remember. No, 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 no killing, no stealing, no illicit sex, no lying, no intoxicants. You keep those in mind and you look at yourself in the course of an ordinary life. Do you have trouble keeping the precepts? If that's the case, what are you going to do when things get really tough? You've got to develop the qualities of mind that will help toughen your precepts and make you more reliable, because this is probably the biggest thing to be worried about, the biggest fear we should have about future, that we can't depend on ourselves to be virtuous in all situations. One of the ways of developing a more dependable attitude is to develop the next 2 qualities, i.e., a sense of shame and a sense of compunction. Shame here is not the debilitating shame that psychiatrists are making all their money off of. It's a healthy shame that comes from your own self-esteem. You're a good person, an honorable person. Certain kinds of behavior are beneath you, and you'd be ashamed to do them. In other words, shame is not saying you're a bad person. It's actually saying you're a good person. So you should have a sense of shame around doing things that would go against genuine self-esteem. This is a good protection. The next one, compunction, is a word we don't use much, and it's sad that we don't use it much. The British meaning is that you feel guilty about something after having done it. Here, though, we're talking about the American meaning, which is that when you think about doing something unskillful in the future, you tell yourself, no, I just wouldn't feel right doing that. You'd be afraid of the consequences. You might say it's the opposite of apathy. It's a sense of having some moral scruples. This kind of fear is one that the Buddha actually encourages, the fear of doing something unskillful. There are a lot of other fears. We were talking today about the sutta on the fears of animals in the jungle. Right here we've got snakes, we've got bobcats. Bobcats aren't all that scary, but snakes are pretty scary sometimes. The fear of earthquakes, the fear of what's out there in the dark, those kinds of fears, the Buddha doesn't encourage you to develop. He does encourage you to develop the fear of doing something that's going to be unskillful, that's going to cause harm. So you want to exercise that fear. Our society is one that tends to poo-poo that, and they encourage you to do all kinds of unskillful things. If you have any sense of shame or conscience around that, they accuse of not being a real man, or not being tough enough, or whatever. It's a very unhealthy culture. Then you notice the two big enemies of shame and compunction. One is anger. When anger comes up, it pushes those attitudes out of the way. It wants to do what it wants to do. It feels justified in doing it and doesn't want to hear anything else. If you add that with some intoxicants, then shame and compunction just go by the board. So, these four qualities of conviction, virtue, shame, and compunction all go together, and they should strengthen one another. These are real treasures because they keep you from doing things that you'll later regret. I remember hearing over the radio one time, a Vietnam vet, 50-some years after the war, remembering a young Vietnamese girl that he killed during the war. As he said, he thinks about her every night, and the memory is driving him crazy. He would give $1 million to be able to go back and undo that act. Well, you can't go back and undo the things you've done in the past. But if you can have an attitude that will prevent you from doing those things to begin with, see how much it's worth, more than $1 million. Skillful action doesn't just mean avoiding unskillful things, but also means actively doing skillful things. This is what the next treasure is about, i.e., generosity, the willingness to give, seeing that you've got something you'd like to share. It doesn't have to necessarily be a material thing. It could be that you give of your time, you give of your experience, you give of your energy, you give forgiveness. This willingness to share in itself is a real treasure because it creates a really good state of mind, a state of mind that says, you know, I have more than enough. That's a wealthy state of mind. It's a state of mind that's a lot less likely to do the kinds of things that would cause you to break the precepts. Then there's learning. You learn about right view. You learn about the teachings of the Dhamma as best you can. You don't have to learn about all of them, but enough to give yourself guidance. It's one of the reasons why we chant so often, because these phrases get into your head and they'll pop up sometimes right when you need them. Reflections on the body, reflections on aging, illness, and death. Reflections on what is a true friend, what's not a true friend. There are reasons why these passages were chosen by Ajahn Suwat. We chant them so often so that they can get burned into your mind, so that they're there when you need them. Finally, there's discernment. As Ajahn Lee says, this is probably the most important treasure on the list because he says you could be lacking in other things, but as long as you have discernment. Of course, here he means discernment that's nurtured by proper conviction and virtue and all the others. You can set yourself up in life, even if you lack other things. He said if you lack discernment, you may be sitting right over gold and you won't be able to make any use out of it. If you have discernment, you may be living in a place with nothing but grass and dirt, but you can make something out of that grass and dirt. You can turn it into gold. In other words, you learn how to look at your mind to see what's wrong it, but also see what potentials are right with it, and you learn how to develop those potentials even in the face of what seem to be overwhelming odds. Look at the forest Ajahns. Most of them were the sons of peasants, and yet that didn't stop them from gaining awakening. It's because they had discernment. They developed their discernment. So, these are your treasures. These are the things that will keep you safe, regardless of what happens in the future. In particular, they keep you safe from the biggest danger, the worst thing that could happen to you, i.e., that you develop wrong view and start acting in ways that would be harmful to yourself and others. The results of that would last for a long, long time. So remember, when you start feeling fear about the future, ask yourself, what are the appropriate things to fear? Once you get your priorities straight, that's an act of discernment, and that's a treasure right there.